which is an introduction to ATM. So what I hope for this topic that you end up with a vision or an idea of what ATM is, what are the different factors that affect ATM, what are the different players, and this is going to be a little bit dense because the air traffic management system is a very vast topic. It has a lot of little parts and ideas, but I want to give you a whole idea of what the ATM is, and well, let's start. So this is the outline of this topic. I will start with an introduction. Then we will take a look of the 3 different parts of ATM, which are the air traffic services, the airspace management system, and the air traffic flow management system. So, and finally, we will have a little idea of what the key performance areas are. I want to tell you in advance that we will have a lot of these abbreviations, but don't go crazy on them. In ATM, we use a lot of abbreviations for everything, so don't worry too much about them. But yeah, you will be hearing these abbreviations a lot. So let's start with the introduction. What is ATM? So ICAO defines air traffic management as the aggregation of airborne functions and ground-based functions, which are the air traffic services, airspace management, and air traffic flow management, required to ensure the safe and efficient movement of aircraft during all phases of operation. So basically, the air traffic management are all the services that are related to air navigation. And in particular, we have the 3 main services, which are the air traffic services, the airspace management, and the air traffic flow management. So we will go in each one of them individually later. So in general, the air traffic services are those services that include flight information service, all-engine service, air traffic advisory service, and air traffic control service, which are these services that are provided at the same time of the flight and are in direct contact with the aircraft operations. Then we have the airspace management, which is a function with the objective of maximizing the utilization of the airspace. And finally, we will have the air traffic flow management, which has the objective of contributing to a safe and orderly flow of air traffic. And the main objective is that the air traffic control capacity is sufficient to respond to the air traffic demand. So as I said, we will be looking at these 3 services in detail in the next sections. So the air traffic management system is one of the air navigation services. So air navigation services are all the services that are provided to air traffic and that make air traffic possible in general. So we will have these 5 air navigation services, and as I said, air traffic management is just one of these air navigation services. So we will be focusing on this branch over here. So we have, to give you an idea of what air navigation services are, we will have communication, navigation, and surveillance, which are all the elements and all the how could I say this, all the services that make possible the air navigation in terms of technologies, like the navigation services and the surveillance, like all the technology that's behind aviation. Then we have the meteorological services, which are which give us weather weather information. And we have search and rescue, that you can imagine what these services does. They are basically based on emergencies. And finally, the aeronautical services, which are also called the aeronautical information services, which give us all the information and all the data and update this data for the air traffic to be able to function. And finally, we will have the air traffic management, which is the subject of this course. So as I said, the air traffic management has these three services, and at the same time, the air traffic service has these three over here, which are the air traffic control, the flight information service, and the alerting service. So now I want to give you an idea of what the different organization in the world, like in both internationally and in the European context, that have an important role in ATM. So first of all, I want to say that in this course, I will be focusing more on European ATM because it's something that concerns us more. So even though I will be having a focus on European, I want you to have an idea of what international organizations are around the world. So the first one is ICAO, which is a very important organization in ATM. So it's the International Civil Aviation Organization. It has 193 national governments in it, and the ICAO, what the objective is to support the diplomacy and of cooperation in air transport between these member states. It was created in the Chicago Convention in 1944. And it has the headquarters in Montreal. And what ICAO does is it manages all the aeronautical spheres and establishes world standards. So ICAO has give us standards about air traffic, and also give general practices for these member states, but it does not have the power to enforce these standards. So what ICAO does, what ICAO proposes is finally the state's responsibility to enforce these laws into their national regulations. So it's like the UN. The UN it's similar to that in the sense that it has no real power in the state's regulations. So similar to ICAO, but in the context of Europe, is the ACAC, which is the European Civil Aviation Conference. It was created in 1955, and similar to ICAO, it has the aim to harmonize civil aviation policies and practices among its member states, which are 44 member states in Europe. So the objective of the ACAC is the promotion of a safe, efficient, and sustainable European air transport system. And at the same, similar to ICAO, the ACAC promotes recommendations and practices, but are the European states are the ones in charge of implementing those practices. Then we have another important international organization, which is Eurocontrol, which is the European Organization for the Safety of Air Navigation. Eurocontrol, basically what it does is it performs under the Single European Sky legislation, which will be, so the Single European Sky is basically the vision for the future of ATM in Europe. So the European Commission is the one that's involved in this European, this Single European Sky legislation, and Eurocontrol in particular has 4 major roles, which are: first, is a technical support for the European Commission and EASA. We will we'll talking about them very soon, and it's the technical support for them for assisting them in regulatory actions. It's also the performance review body to assist the Commission in the development of the implementation of the performance scheme. And most importantly, Eurocontrol is the network manager for the ATM network. And we will see later what the network management does and why is it so important for European ATM. And finally, one major role of Eurocontrol is it performs the CESAR joint undertaking activities. So we will be talking a lot about CESAR joint undertaking, but it's basically the research that it's associated to the Single European Sky. So next we have EASA, which is the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, and this is an agency of the European Union. So EASA has the responsibility for civil aviation safety, and one of the more important rules of EASA is that it certifies and approves products and organization. So having the certification from EASA means that an airport and then that a pilot will be able to fly, that an aircraft will be able to fly. So the European, the EASA has a major role in allowing the airworthiness of all the little parts of air traffic, and also has this other task, but more importantly, it's the certification of approval. The EASA is necessary to fly in Europe. And similar to EASA, we have other guilds around the world. So the FAA will be similar to EASA, but in the United States. We have IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association, which is an association of the world airlines. This is very important as well. Then we have the ACI, which is the Airport Council International, which is a representative of the world airports. We have the International Federation of Air Traffic Controllers, which is an association of air traffic controllers, and also the Council, which is the Civil Air Navigation Service Organization, which is an association of air navigation service providers. So I'm gonna go back a little bit. So in this course, we will be taking a lot of look at what ICAO says about ATM, because all the standards for ATM are set basically by ICAO, and also we will be taking a lot of care about what Eurocontrol has to say, because he is the network manager in Europe. So all the organization of the ATM in Europe falls in the hands of Eurocontrol, and that's basically it. For EASA, yeah, this is a very important organization, but it won't be as important for us in ATM. And yeah, these are also quite nice that you have in mind that they exist, especially the FAA, because it's basically as important as Eurocontrol and EASA, but it's concerning the United States, and we live in Europe, so we will be taking a look at what we have here more. So yeah, we will continue with the ATM stakeholders. So what are ATM stakeholders? They are the interested parties or influential players that affect or are affected by ATM. So basically, they can be grouped into these groups over here, which are first their states. States play an important role in ATM because they will be the regulators of air traffic over their territory. We also have air navigation service provider. So air navigation services, we saw that there was all the services that are necessary to allow air navigation. So these air navigation services must be provided by someone, which are the air navigation service providers. We also have airspace user, which are basically us. And what I mean us is all the passenger for civil flights, also the airlines that operate those civil flights, and also military flights, and in general, any other user that uses the airspace. Then we have airports, which are also quite important in ATM. And finally, the network manager, which is in Europe, again, is Eurocontrol, is in charge of managing the managing the route network, managing ATM and air traffic flow management, etc. So let's have a look at these individual ones. I mean, you can always find more ATM stakeholders, right? For example, aircraft manufacturers, or anybody that you can think it could be interested in ATM or in air traffic is finally an ATM stakeholder. But these 5 are the 5 that Eurocontrol categorizes. So we will be taking a look at this. So first, let's talk a little bit about the states. The states are a very important player in ATM because states have sovereignty over their airspace. That means that a state can restrict or prohibit aircraft from other states from flying over territories of the state, and also they are responsible to providing airports, radius services, meteorological services, on every other air navigation services that it's necessary to fly over that territory. Those states that take part in the Chicago Convention are members of ICAO, and as I said earlier, the states must translate ICAO recommended practices and procedure into the national legislation. So to do so, the states have a civil aviation authority, which is a government authority that maintains an aircraft registry and also oversees the approval and regulation of civil aviation. So in Sweden, this task is performed by, I don't know how to pronounce that,
Transportstyrelsen.
That's perfect, thank you. Transportstyrelsen, more or less. So yeah, this is the Civil Aviation Authority in Sweden, and yeah, this is responsible for all the legislation about civil aviation. So what the Civil Aviation Authorities does is to they translate the ICAO recommendation into the regulation in those in those states regarding aviation. So let's have a look at air navigation service providers. What they do is, of course, they provide air navigation services, and they should be provided according to ICAO by independent authorities. So it's better that these air navigation service providers are independent of states, but that's not always the case. So we have three basic forms of air navigation service providers, which are first, we have the first type, which is government departments. So they are dependent of the state budget, and their staff is have the status of civil servants. So, for example, this was the common case in the past for all air navigation service providers, but eventually the states didn't want to take the whole responsibility for providing air navigation services, so they started having that responsibility on other parties. So some states still has this kind of air navigation service provider, which are a part of the states, which is, for example, the Federal Aviation, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority in the United States. But what's more common in all the world is that the ANSPs are autonomous bodies belonging to the public sector, but they are separate for the states. So, for example, this is generally all the air navigation service providers in Europe, including the LFB in Sweden. And lastly, the last form is that the ANSPs are either partially or fully privatized, which is the case, for example, of air navigation service providers in Canada. So, as I said, the ANSP in Sweden is LFB, and it provides all air navigation services. Yeah, so let's continue with the airports. So airports also have a very important role in ATM. You can imagine why, but two things why airports are important in air traffic management is because first, they generate a high air traffic density around them, and two, because the airport's installation should be sized accordingly to accommodate the traffic demands, and also should not induce delays, which of course they eventually do. But yeah, both its presence alters the air traffic around the area, and also they can induce delays, or in general they are important in ATM. So they can be identified by either an ICAO code or an IATA code. I could say this is more common. Take my word with a pinch of salt, but I always see the IATA code more. For example, the Stockholm Arlanda Airport has an IATA code of ERM and an ICAO code of ASSA. I don't know, which one do you think is the more common?
The first one.
Yeah, right? I think so too. I think it's the one that you get in all the tickets that you get for flying, so that's where we're seeing it more.
That code is also on the bag tags when you check in, so.
Yeah, that's why maybe. Yeah. Well, yeah, you should know that they also have an ICAO code, but yeah, the IATA one is more common. So yeah, we have the FAA has a classification for airports, I mean, airports can be classified in other ways, but this one is very used. It differentiates between commercial service airports, which are airports that have a lot of passengers. In particular, they have non-primary airports, which has less than 10,000 passengers and more than 2,500. And primary airports, which are airports that have more than 10,000 passengers per year. They also have a classification for cargo service airports, which are airports where the air transportation of cargo is very large, in particular more than 100 million pounds per year. And I must say that airports can be both commercial service airports and cargo service airports. They also have reliever airports, which are designed to relieve congestion on other airports if necessary. And they also have the last classification, which is for small airports, which is the general aviation airports, which include those airports that have less than 2,500 passengers per year. And finally, let's talk a little bit about airspace user. So we can define airspace users of organization operating the aircraft and their pilots. So we have two classifications for airspace user. So Eurocontrol has this classification, which is again very common. It differentiates between general air traffic, JAT, which are flights that are conducted in accordance with the rules and provisions of ICAO. Basically, they are civil aircraft, and that aircraft that are are operated by either commercially or private. And the second classification is operational air traffic, which is basically military. So yeah, we have civil and military aircraft, basically. And the difference is that these flights are according to ICAO rules, and these are according to any other rules that may be needed. And the pilots also have two different the flights have also two different classifications depending on the rules that they're using. So we're gonna be looking at visual flight rules, VFR, which are flights where they have no air traffic control. That means that the pilot is responsible for knowing what the aircraft is, and they do so by taking a look at the surroundings. And of course, VFR flights are subject to the meteorological conditions. That is to say, if there is no visibility, you cannot fly with visual flight rules. And the second type of flight rules is instrumental flight routes, and the instrumental part means navigation aids. And with this kind of rules, you can fly without having any visuals. That means that you can find your location using just instruments. So basically, these are the flights that are controlled by air traffic controllers, and the pilots are always aware of their position because they have the indications of the air traffic controllers and also the information from navigation aids. Basically, the visual flight rules are usually small aircraft and such, and all the important. I mean, the ones that we are using for flying are instrumental flight rules aircraft, which again, they are subject to the regulations of air traffic controllers. Yeah, this was an introduction of what the stakeholders are, what the different organizations are, and to give you an idea of the objectives of the ATM. I know it's a lot of information right now and a lot of abbreviations and things like that, but I hope that maybe you can have a look. When we have the assignment one, we will have a look at the European Master Plan, and we will have more time to assimilate all of this. So now I'm going to start talking about the air traffic services. So I'm gonna go back a little bit. Yeah, ATM had 3 services, which were airspace management, air traffic services, and air traffic flow management. So we are going to be looking at this part over here, the air traffic services. And this is a quite important service. I'm not saying that these 2 aren't, because they totally are. I mean, practically as important. But when we think, I don't know if you think the same, but when we think about air traffic management, I'm basically picturing air traffic controllers, which is not the case. I mean, we have to take the whole thing into consideration, but like that position of one person in a tower controlling the aircraft is like a vision that I think we all have. So this is the air traffic services. These are services that are in direct contact with the aircraft, that take place at the same time that the aircraft are flying, and they provide all the information necessary to fly. So let's start with what the objectives of the air traffic services are, and what different air traffic services, are. So as I said, air traffic, this is a typo here. It should say air traffic services, not control. So this one, check. Air traffic services deal with the movement of air traffic in the airspace. And when I say airspace, I mean airspace in the air and in the ground, which means both aerodromes and the airspace in general. So the objectives of air traffic services are, first, they have to prevent collisions between aircraft. And the second is to prevent collision between aircraft on the maneuvering area and obstructions of that area, which basically means that prevent collisions between aircraft that are still in the ground in aerodromes and got the obstacles around it. The third objective is to expedite and maintain an orderly flow of air traffic. The fourth objective would be to provide advice and information useful for the safe and efficient conduct of flights. And finally, the last objective would be to notify appropriate organization regarding aircraft in need of search and rescue. As you can see, these definitions are always very technical, and that's because they are obtained from ICAO. So all this information you can obtain from ICAO documents. So I've done my best to try to have a little summary of all ICAO information. So yeah, these are the 5 objectives of ATS, and basically the different divisions of ATS are responsible for taking care of one or more of these objectives. So for example, to accomplish objectives 1, 2, and 3, we have the air traffic control service. So let's go back a little bit. The objectives 1, 2, and 3 are prevent collisions, both between aircraft and obstacles, and maintain an orderly flow of air traffic. So air traffic control services do basically that. So we have three types of ATC, which are the area control service, the approach control service, and the aerodrome control service. So ATC is basically air traffic controllers in the tower or in the area center, giving indications to the aircraft, and basically controlling that they are not bumping into each other and that the flow is okay. So in order to accomplish objective 4, which was to provide useful information and advice, we have the flight information service. And finally, to accomplish objective 5, which was to notify organizations of aircraft in need of search and rescue, we have the alerting service. So these are the three services. I would say that this one is the one that we're going to be taking most of the time talking about. But of course, flight information service and alerting service as important. But first, before I start explaining what air traffic control, FIS and ALS does, I'm gonna be talking a little bit about the classification of the airspace, because I think it's important to know how the airspace is classified, because if one airspace is classified one way or the other, one ATS will be used in that airspace or not. So as I said, the airspace is designated depending on the type of air traffic service that are provided in that service, in that airspace, sorry. So we have basically three types of airspace. First, we have the flight information regions, which are portions of the airspace when flight information services and alerting services are always provided. These basically flight information regions are basically all the airspace in the territory of a country. And yeah, in these flight information regions, which are very large regions, we always have flight information service and alerting services. So the second type of airspace is the control areas and control zones, which I will define what the two are next. But what's important to know is that in these areas, in these zones, we have air traffic control service. That means that instrumental flights are going to be controlled by ATC. And finally, the last type of airspace is control aerodromes, which are aerodromes where there is air traffic control service. I mean, not all aerodromes have ATC. That's why we must do the differentiation. For example, small private aerodromes may not have even a tower. So only those that have ATC are called control aerodromes. So this is the flight information regions in Europe. In general, flight information regions, as we see, have all the territory of the country inside the borders of the flight information region, but and also they have the water surrounding the country, but the borders of this flight information region, they should not be designed to perfectly copy the borders of the country, but they should be designed with an operational purpose for efficiency purposes. which is not always the case, but in general they should be designed as the provision of the services is more optimal. And also the flight information region is usually divided in two parts, which are the lower airspace and the upper airspace. So in these figures over here, we have the flight information regions in the lower airspace in Europe. We can see here the one of Sweden. For example, in particular in Sweden, the fare is one single block. But for example, let's take a look at France. We can see that they have 4 different flight information regions. And then this is because the authorities in France decided that that was more convenient or more efficient. And then we can have a different flight information region in the upper airspace, which is sometimes called UIR, or upper information region. And for example, it can be different from the lower airspace. And we can see, for example, in the case of France, they have 4 FIR, but just 1 UER. In the case of Sweden, it's the same. So yeah, this is the configuration of fare in Europe. And as I said, the flight information regions are those regions where both flight information service and alerting service is provided. That does not mean that the air traffic control service is provided in the whole flight information region. In particular, the ATC is going to be performed in this class of airspace, which are the control areas. And also we will have the controls regions. So the control areas are defined as a control airspace extending upwards from a specified limit above the earth. That means that they are not from the ground, okay? We are airspace that are above a given altitude, and what the CTAs must do is that they must cover those airspace that will have the flight paths of IFR flights. So in these regions, we are sure that we're going to have flights that are going to need ATC service. Okay, so we have 2 particular designations for control areas. One of them that I'm sure you have heard about are the airways. So airways are corridors between 2 points where the aircraft are provided with air traffic control. And another one that is also very, I'm sure you have heard these, as are terminal control areas. So these terminal control areas contain the control traffic about the aerodromes that are very busy. So this is a picture of the different terminal control areas in Sweden. We can see that basically there's a big one around each important airport. And in here we can see a close-up of the DMAs around Stockholm and this area that you live in. Is how is it pronounced?
Östergötland.
Oh my God, I will never be able to pronounce that. Yeah, so as you can see, the TMAs. Thank you for the pronunciation. The TMAs around these airports. They are basically areas around airports where the flights are controlled. So then we have the CTRs. The CTRs are basically, well, the definition is a controlled airspace spanning upwards from the surface of the Earth to a specified upper limit. And basically, this is areas around the aerodrome, which are defined from the floor up. And basically, they are like smaller CTAs, but more closer to the aircraft, to the airports, sorry. And in these aerodromes, where CTRs are around them, which is it is necessary to impose additional restriction, not only in the IFR flights, but also in the BFR flights. So this is a close-up of the different control regions in around Stockholm. So we have the Arlanda airport over here, and we can see that it extends from the ground to 2,000 feet. And as you can see, these are more smaller than the TMAs and that the CTAs, but basically what I want you to remember is that we have different regions of the airspace that is controlled, and we have these smaller ones around airports that are very busy, which is not the case of airport. I mean, this is not all airports in Sweden, just those that are important to control the VFR flights. And we have the bigger CTAs, which are areas that are not on the ground, but a little upper. So basically, VFR flights can fly under CTAs without the need to be controlled. So that's why they are not from the ground up, but they have a little altitude. So VFR flights can fly freely. And then they can be the terminal motivated areas and the airways. So yeah, I know it's a little bit confusing. I hope that it's not that much, but yeah, this is basically the different differentiations of classified not classified, designate airspace where the different air traffic services take place. And finally, we had the, let's go back a little bit. We have the controlled aerodromes. I'm sorry, I don't have a picture for you for the different aerodromes that there are in Sweden. But basically, you can see, basically all controlled aerodromes fall between these CTRs. I'm sure there will be maybe more of them, but basically those are aerodromes that have a tower and that have the service of air traffic control. So yeah, so next we have a classification of the airspace. So depending on whether the rules are more severe or less severe, we have different classifications. So ICAO have 7 classifications going from A to G. And this is the more restricted one. We have rules for that are, I mean, when I say restricted, I mean that they are more controlled. The aircraft are not as free to fly as they want. They must take into consideration the restriction from the ATC, and as we go from A to G, we encounter less controlled airspace. So we start with class A, which only FAR flights are permitted and they are separated. As we go down, we will see that we have less and less conditions for the aircraft to fly until we have class G. So basically these two, we can say that F and G are uncontrolled airspace. So class G, basically they can fly whenever. So those IFR and BFR flights are permitted to fly, and they only receive information if they want. They don't even have to receive information. Yeah, this is the classification of the airspace, and depending on if we have more rules over here and less rules over here. So yeah, this is all for the airspace. So I'm gonna stop talking about the flight information service, but if you have any questions so far, this could be a good time to ask.
Could we take like a little break, maybe 5 minutes?
Okay, so the class finish at 5. So maybe we can take a break until 4:30 if you want. So yeah, so before we take the little, I'm sorry, I know this is a lot of information from in just one take, but it's better that you know this stuff a little bit before we take a look at papers that that we'll start talking about all of this, and you have to look everything up. And also, hopefully, you have this slide later to look all the information you want. So, anybody has any questions? If before we take the little break. No? Okay, perfect. I hope that means that I've explained everything perfectly and that my slides are great. So we are, yeah, thank you for the suggestion for the break because I'm very tired too. So may we come back at 5:30?
Yeah.
Well, it's okay for me.
Perfect. Okay, well, see you in 5 minutes then. Hello. Is anybody there? So I want to ask you, is this all new to you? Have you seen anything of what I've talked about in other classes or so?
We've heard it before.
Sorry?
Some of it. Yes, we've heard it before. Some of it, at least.
Okay. Okay. Well, have you have like a class devoted to air traffic in general, or have you seen it as part of other things?
If I remember correctly, we talked about some different airspace levels, like control around the airport, which type of ATC take care of which part of the airspace over different countries, that there are different standard levels between different European countries, which makes the single European sky a bit of an issue, and the traffic chaos over the central western parts of Europe.
Yes.
Instead of the eastern parts, because of the traffic over Spain and France.
Okay. Okay, I'm glad that you have already seen something. So my objective here is to give a general idea. I know it's difficult because just saying abbreviation doesn't do much. But again, having all these definitions and all these classifications can be a little bit overwhelming. But I think that after these 2 or 3 initial classes, maybe we will have something a little less heavy. But I hope that at least I'm giving you some view of the general parts. So, okay, let's continue then. I hope everybody's there. So let's go back a little bit to see what we have left. So we had an introduction. We have the air traffic services, which were okay. So we have the air traffic services that we are talking about. We have the flight information service and the alerting service, which are always provided in a flight information region. And then we have the air traffic control, which is provided in control zones and control areas, and also around control aerodromes. So now we're going to talk about flight information service. What is the purpose of this service and basically what it does. So let's go over here. So the flight information service provides the following information. Again, this information is available in all of the flight information region. So we have information about the meteorological conditions, which are given in 2 different reports, which are the SIGMET and the ERMET. These are different meteorological reports. Then we have information about volcanic activity or toxic materials in the atmosphere, anything that will affect the flights. Then we have information about, for example, changes in the availability of navigation aids. If a navigation aid have any problem, we will have the information on the flight information service. Then we have information about changes in the aerodromes. So, for example, if an aerodrome is not suitable to descend because of snow or ice, we will have that information given by the FIS. And also, we will have information about unmanned free balloons and yeah, all the things that will affect the flight. And also, the flight information system must provide the flights with this information over here. First, the weather conditions of the airports of departure and destination, and also the weather conditions of airports that may be important to the flight, maybe because it's an airport that it's an emergency airport or something that's relevant to the flight. Then we have information about collisions hazard, but that's only given in this kind of airspace classes, which are the less controlled ones. And why is not collision hazard information given in airspace classes A, B, or C? I mean, sorry, A or B. That's because the flights in those airspace that are very regulated are already separated by the ATC. So they have the separation by the ATC, so they don't need any additional information from the Flight Information Service about collision hazards. Of course, in airspace where this separation is not provided, which are C, D, F to G, we will have this information. And as we saw earlier, even in airspace G, if the flights do not want to have this information, they just can ignore it. But they must provide, this information must be provided by the Flight Information Service. And finally, they also provide information about boats if it's needed by the pilot. And that's basically it. This is what the more important part about the flight information services. And again, this is provided in all the flight information region, and to those aircraft that need it. And as we saw here in the airspace classifications, different airspace classes will have the flight information service, but some of them will not have it if they not requested, but it's available there. So let's talk a little bit about the alerting service. The alerting service is, the objective is to notify the appropriate organization regarding the aircraft that need search and rescue, basically. So the ATC, the alerting service must be provided for all the aircraft that have air traffic control. And if possible, all those aircraft that has filled a flight plan. We will see later what a flight plan is. Maybe you already know what a flight plan is. So so basically, a flight plan is the intent of the aircraft, and they share it with the ATS, but not flights have to fill a flight plan. So if the ATS know that an aircraft is flying with a filled flight plan, even though it's not provided with air traffic control, this aircraft will be a potential subject of alerting service, and also to any aircraft known or believed to be subject to unlawful interference, like I don't know, terrorist attack or something like that, or whatever. But basically, in the end, the alerting service is provided to all the flights that the ATC can. Of course, if the flight is not reported, they haven't filled a flight plan, or is flying in an airspace that is not controlled, there would be no way to provide it with such a service. But if it's provided with ATC or has filled a flight plan, they will be provided with a service.
So the flight plan is the route that aircraft will fly to a certain destination.
Yes, basically, a flight plan is the intents of the flight. They must give a given information. So we have a section on that. So let's jump to that, and over here. So a flight plan is is something that is a document that a flight fills, and they have the intended flight of the aircraft. It has this information. They have the information about the aircraft itself. So which is the identification. It's flying with visual flight rules or with instrumental flight rules, which is the equipment of the aircraft. So all of that information. Then we have information about the mission, about the operation. So which is the time of departure, the time of arrival, which are the airports of a departure and arrival, which are the waypoints or the route that the aircraft are going to follow. Then we have some information about the emergency data. So how many people go in that aircraft? How many fuel does this aircraft have? How long can they fly if they have any issues? And also we have information about the crew, so which the name of the pilot and the certification, etc. So basically all the information that the air traffic services need to allow this aircraft to fly. So not all the aircraft have to fly this, but in order to have ATC they must. And also these flight plans are provided to Eurocontrol, which is the network manager. We will see this in a minute. Well, in a minute, no, we'll see this tomorrow maybe. But basically, Eurocontrol must validate these flight plans. So not all flight plans are okay, because maybe the network is congested, or there is too much demand, or I don't know, there's some meteorological hazard. So the network manager must validate these flight plans, and if maybe they can correct it. But basically this is information about the flight and what it's going to do over that flight. So now that you ask, let me share with you what a flight plan looks like. So one second. Okay, I'm sharing another screen now. So this is what an aircraft, a flight plan looks like. We have the flight time, the code of the airport that's going to fly, the identification of the aircraft. That's the how is this name? The similar to what the cars have, like the identification number.
Registration.
Yeah. And all the information about the aerodrome, the total time that the flight's gonna have, the persons on board. So basically, all the information that must be shared, it's in this document over here. So yeah, this must be filled before the flight. And this is the information that the ATC has, and also the air traffic flow management service has, which we will see tomorrow maybe. So okay, let's go back to the presentation. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. So if the ATC knows the flight plan, they know where the aircraft is going to be, etc. So they should be able to provide alerting service to that aircraft. Okay, so let's. Okay, perfect. Are we back to the presentation? Can you see it correctly?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about air traffic control. So we have talked about alerting service, flight information service, and the last part of the air traffic services, which is air traffic control, which are these figure of air traffic controllers that we all have in mind. So the objectives of the ATC there are two, as we saw in the beginning. They must prevent collisions between aircraft and other obstruction in the maneuvering area, and also it must expedite and maintain the orderly flow of air traffic. This means that the air traffic must be efficient, and they must do it fast. So one thing that the ATC must do is they must provide proper separation between the aircraft. So there are a list of separation requirements that are different depending on the phase of the flight. For example, aircraft that are flying in a cruise mode has a different separation requirement than aircraft that are approaching to an airport. So I'm not gonna get into it because there are a lot of rules regarding separation between aircraft, but ATC must guarantee that the separation between the aircraft is the correct one in order to avoid conflicts, in order to avoid collisions. So they are going to enforce this separation in those airspace that must be done. So as I said, they must guarantee separation, and there is an horizontal separation that must be given and a vertical separation. So ATC is provided in all instrumental flight rules flights that are in this airspace over here, basically all controlled airspaces. I remember that F and G airspace were not controlled airspaces. And VFR flights are also provided with ATC if they fly in these three classes of airspace. Remember that VFR flights were not allowed to fly in the more controlled ones in A. Also, it must be provided to a special VFR flights. So what are special visual flight rules flights? So these are flights that are flying with visual flight rules, but because of the meteorological conditions may not be enough for them to fly purely on visuals, they must rely on ATC to perform the flight. So these are flights that for one reason or another are in a control zone, and the air traffic controller has said, okay, you can fly here, but you must comply with this control, basically because they cannot operate on themselves. So they are below visual meteorological conditions. The visual meteorological conditions are basically the conditions that are necessary for a VFR flight to fly. So if the meteorological conditions are bad, are lower than this over here, the VFR flights will not be able to fly on themselves. So special VFR flights will be also provided with ATC. And finally, it's also provided in all controlled aerodromes. So ATC is divided into three services. First, we have area control service. Basically, so let's start from the bottom up, okay? So we have aerodrome control service. This is ATC that's provided in an aerodrome, and it's provided by a tower, which this is the abbreviation. I'm sure you have seen it. So then we have approach control service, which are the ATC that provides services to aircraft that are associated with arrival or departure. So they are not in the aerodrome, but they are either approaching to it or they are flying away from it. So it can be provided by a tower or also by an area control center. And finally, the area control service is the provision of ATC for the rest of them. Okay, so they are not either in the aerodrome, they are not in approach. So basically a route. This is a summary of the different ATCs. So as I said, we have aerodrome control, approach control, and area control. The area control is given by ACC. The approach control is given by either a tower or ACC, but also sometimes we have a facility that's the approach control center, which are maybe a department of the ACC or the tower itself, and the aerodrome tower. So in here we have a basic summary of what the different controls are. So the aerodrome control is given in the runways, taxiways, all the different places of the airport. Basically, they must manage the takeoff and the landing of the aircraft. Then we have the approach, which basically they control the approach and the departure phases. And lastly, the area control, the ACC controls the aircraft that are basically en route, which are basically the largest part of the flight. So this is a little drawing that I found that's very illustrative of the different phases of the ATC. We have the different phases for a whole flight will be first, we are at the aerodrome, so we will have control of the tower. So when the aircraft is in the aerodrome, the control tower of the departure airport will have control over the aircraft, but once the aircraft has leave the airport, the control tower staff transfer the flights to the approach air traffic controllers. So one thing that's maybe I didn't say because it's pretty obvious is that the air traffic control is provided by air traffic controllers. Sorry, we have a chat. Are there remote towards in Spain too? We have several in Sweden. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I will look it up and tell you on Thursday, okay? On the top of my mind, I think not, but I'm sure someone must be. So I'll write it down. There are remote towers in Spain. Okay, I'm sorry, Eric. I will answer you on Thursday. So yeah, the air traffic controllers are basically the figure that is responsible for air traffic control. So in each one of the towers, the control centers, etc., there is a number of air traffic controllers that are responsible for different flights. So then once the approach, the aircraft are climbing, they are controlled by the approach control service. Then we have the route cruise, which is managed by the en route control service or the area control service. Then we have the descent in the terminal area, which is again given by the approach control service. And finally, in the airport of destination, we have the aerodrome control service. Yeah, so basically the ATC is responsible for the separation and that the aircraft load is perfectly fine, but because there are different situations, there are different air traffic situations. There might be more demand in one airspace than another, or maybe different situation may arise. What happens is that the area control center is divided in. I'm sorry. The area control service is divided in different sectors. So sectors are different units, different segregations of the airspace that are under the responsibility of one or more traffic controllers. So these sectors have a given capacity, and they can handle any number of aircraft that are below that capacity. So the capacity of a sector is basically defined as the maximum number of aircraft that can enter the sector in a specified period, while permitting an acceptable level of controller workload. So in this figure over here, we can see the different classification of the different sectors in the airspace in Sweden. So again, these are parts of the airspace that are controlled by a group or a single air traffic controller. And we can see over here that we have the so this figure over here is taken from LFB. They have a very nice web page that maybe I will show it to you because it's very nice. So it's this one over here, new share. So this is the flight information, the aeronautical information service that's provided by the LFB. Are you seeing the web, the crowd? Yeah, okay, perfect. So this page is very nice because it allows you to see the different elements that are in Swedish airspace. So for example, this is the flight information region in Sweden, that over here. And actually, what you can see here as well is they have one thing that let me see, yeah, delegated airspace. So as I said, the borders of the flight information region and also of the different ACCs must not be defined as the actual borders, but more with an operational point of view. So these are parts of the airspace that delegated to neighboring countries in order to make air traffic more efficient. So this is kind of cool. Also, we can see the TMAs, as I said. Also, we have the airdromes. This one is really cool. So why I was showing you this? Oh, yeah, because they have the sectors. Okay, so in this page over here, you can see all the different sectors. For example, this is in this is Stockholm. So as you can see, the sectors some goes from the ground to unlimited, basically, but some of them go from given altitude to another one. So this is the designation. This page is very nice because you can click, you can give information, and you can have the information about that whatever. In this particular case, the feeder and the sector. This is very nice. So basically, you can see that there are some. This is like a little red. This is more dark than this one. I don't know if you can see. That's because they are showing us different sectors that are on top of each other, which is sometimes that's the case. We have a given sector might be divided in smaller sectors that are activated if there is more demand. So yeah, this is a very nice web page to look around. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to these slides. So yeah, a sector is basically a portion of the airspace that's controlled by an air traffic controller or a group of them, and they must be defined as they must accommodate a given number of flights, which defines the capacity of that sector. This will be particularly important later for air traffic flow management. And flow management positions, we define the different configuration of the sectors. So yeah, that's basically it. And I think we are done with air traffic services, and we are done with the class as well for today. So we have covered a lot today, I think. So do you have any questions?
How many planes can it be in one sector?
Oh, that's a very nice question. So the answer is the capacity. So each sector has a given capacity. Okay, so
Is there any place where you can find the capacity, or?
that's okay. That question is super difficult. First, so the ATS has a. We have a chat. Yes, I'm sorry. I will continue with your question. Sorry. So the air traffic services must provide these capacities as a number, as a given number. Okay, so that the air traffic flow, the air traffic flow management can handle them. But nowadays, there is one thing called air traffic flow and capacity management, which is responsible of computing the capacity of a given sector. And also the capacities of of a sector is not always the same, because it depends on a lot of things. For example, it depends on the complexity of the traffic. It's not the same that that you have a given sector which has the same airplane flying with a scheduled flight every week, or a given sector that you have a lot of different kind of players that are maybe they are not scheduled, or they have some kind of airspace restriction for military, or you have a given waypoint that's that have a lot of traffic. So the complexity of the traffic affects the capacity, and also the weather also affects the capacity, because if you have a bad weather, you cannot fly over the airspace, so the capacity is reduced. So it's not a given number. You will not find a list. I mean, you can find a list of the capacities in the perfect scenario, but that's something that's being continuously evaluated, and it's also very difficult to give that number, okay, because that's an ongoing debate and ongoing research. Also, we have a whole class on capacity that will be managed, that will be given by Valentin. I think it's on week 8 or so. So that's a very good question, because it's a very difficult topic, and I'm sure that we will see a lot of it during the classes. So to give you a number, I think I have no, I think I have a given number for the capacity, more or less, but I don't right now.
It's okay.
Okay, that's fine. But as I said, it's a very difficult thing to compute. And also, I mean, Eurocontrol is always, as network management, as the responsible operator of air traffic flow management, is always computing these capacities in order to see how much the air traffic controllers can manage.